Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today with my good friend, Julie Menden. Julie is not only a speaker, but also a speaker coach. And I had the sincere pleasure of working with her this past year on some of my own endeavors. So, welcome, Julie.
Thank you. So excited to be here with you today.
I know it's really nice to have you on the show. And I know we've both been super busy, so this will be a fun way for us to catch up too.
Yeah.
So, everyone knows this podcast is about sharing our deep and personal stories with one another and the compassion that that fosters when we do that. So, that's where we're going to begin. I'm going to invite you to share a story with us and with our listeners today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. So, what would you like to talk about?
And it's so interesting because when we were, I was kind of like filling out your form and thinking about, what stories. And first of all, I just love what you do because obviously, as a speaker and somebody who helps other people to speak, to bring out their stories, it's like this power of story to I always say when you tell a story, it activates something in somebody. They don't have to
Oh,
have gone through your exact lived experience, but the emotions and the journey that you take them on by telling the story can activate something in them. But it's always so much
absolutely.
easier to help other people, than it is
Isn't it?
yourself. So even when I was thinking about like, ooh, my story, I would
Yeah.
say for me, it's more kind of like an evolving story and this theme in my life. And this is perfect timing because I just had a session with my mindset coach yesterday where we were diving into what I'm going to share with you. But I have had a slew of health issues throughout my life.
Yeah.
Actually, ever since childhood, as him and I were talking about, I had E. coli as a kid where I was like hospitalized,
Wow.
like really bad. I had a lot of stomach issues. I always had something. And really, it throughout college, I had stomach issues. Like I'm a perfectionist here, recovering perfectionist for those of you listening. So obviously we know that affects your, anxiety levels, affects your stomach, all that stuff. But really a lot of my story and what I talk about is back in 2018, I got really sick. I had a 1-year-old, so my son was born in 2017, and I got really sick. And the doctor said it was viral meningitis. So I had to take time off of work. I was, this pain in my brain stem. I didn't know much about
Oh,
viral meningitis until then. And that really was this like catalyst to years and years of progressive health issues.
yeah.
And I mean, I could go on and I worked with so many doctors. I've spent so much money, started going down more of a naturopathic functional medicine because I wasn't getting answers. And then a couple years ago, and we'd be like, hey, you have, SIBO, which is like an small bacterial overgrowth in your intestine. I had gut imbalances, and we'd start diving into that. And they're like, actually, I think there's more of a root cause there. And then all of a sudden, we'd find like another thing. I was like, there's more and more. And so then I found out I had late stage chronic Lyme's disease. And mold
Wow.
toxicity, and I already had celiac, and I had all these things, right? And so it's just like been years and years of trying to heal. I always say it's like fighting my body, trying to heal my body. And then, as Jen knows, and just in August, I was diagnosed with melanoma. And so, October, so the last month and a half of my life has been multiple facial surgeries. So it was on my face. They had to remove it from my nose, but melanoma is the most aggressive form of skin cancer. And so they have to take more than they expect. They ended up having to cut all the way up my forehead. I've had 3 surgeries. So it's
Wow.
been a lot.
I'll
And
say.
yeah, it's just, one of the things that I said is it's like this has been part of my identity.
Mm, yeah,
Yeah.
right. I mean, wow, that's a lot to go through. It's a
Yeah,
lot to
right?
go through. And
In a
of course, my
nutshell.
right, and my whole like holistic side is going to like, what is your body trying to tell you, right?
Yes.
Because our bodies have all this knowledge and
Yeah.
they the story, the book, the body keeps a score. It has like
Yes.
a record. It keeps the records of everything that's ever transpired in our life in
Mhm.
I call it in Earth School. And it's really amazing because our bodies hold so much wisdom and they're like screaming to tell us whatever it
Mhm.
is we need to know, but
Mhm.
we don't always listen, right?
Mhm.
and I'm not saying you, like none of us listen, right?
Right.
We're like, oh, I can plow through this, and like you know, super perfectionist, very much about, you know, my male energy of getting
Mm-hmm.
things done and problem solving, right? And our sort of doing energy.
Yes.
And we're not so great at sort of listening and receiving the messages just
Mm-hmm.
because we're not socialized to do that. And so
Mm-hmm.
we just stuff all that down and we keep going, 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 and going until our body's like, bam,
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah, I'm gonna
you're not.
stop you.
Yeah. So pay attention, right?
Hmm.
And it's not fun, but I think there's always something, like you mentioned, the root cause. There's
Yeah.
something else going on that your body wants you to pay attention to, you know, and
Hmm.
maybe it's simply slow down, you know.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I
we
definitely
want,
think that's such a piece of it, right? It's
yeah,
like,
we want you to slow down and take care of yourself, you
mm-hmm.
know, because as women we're really kind of hardwired to take care of everyone around us, you know,
Yeah.
and to be able to, you know, do it all and with a smile on our face. And
Yeah.
sometimes our bodies just they need rest. They
I
need
always say
quiet. They
it's
need,
like little red flags that it's like, hey, hey, listen, listen, until all of a sudden it's like, okay, fine, you're not gonna listen enough to that. Like
yeah,
I'm gonna totally stop you. And Jen,
exactly.
I'm so curious because I would
Yeah.
love to kind of talk through this and get your perspective just tied off of that. So
Yeah.
my mindset coach that I worked, he's actually does like somatic coaching
Oh
and
yeah, I do as well. Yeah.
yeah, so I was like what was really interesting um is and again kind of coming to our conversation he made this comment around oftentimes so it's a subconscious thing right because I told him I was like consciously I don't want this to be part of my identity.
Right.
I don't like that type of attention. I don't like to be the one who always has like my friends are like hey what protocol are you on now and all that like I don't like
Yeah.
that and it's just been such as part of my identity. I'm like I'm ready to like set it to the side. And he made this comment around oftentimes our subconscious is driving the show and
Totally.
it's benefiting in some way. And I don't have the exact question, but he said something around some questions around like what would I lose by being well
Yeah.
or this idea that somehow it could be attention like as a kid like if you were getting attention through having some type of illness or something and even though you don't think you want that attention your
Oh yeah.
subconscious is still he said it's still like a 7-year-old girl.
Exactly. I was just going to say, so we
Yeah,
form these, but this is like, I love this stuff.
I know. I was
So
like, I know you'd love this. It'd be a good conversation.
we form our belief systems about ourselves between the ages of 0 to 7 years old. Can you believe that? Like those are
Hmm.
super formative years. So everything we experience, our surroundings, the messages that we're given, you know, the environment that we live, our parents, you know, it's nobody's fault. This is just like human stuff. And so everything that we experience forms our belief systems about who we are and what our strengths and perceived weaknesses are. So our subconscious decides, okay, you know, these are my wounds, right?
Hmm.
This is where I shine. This is where I you know, the actions that I can take to get this kind of response. And sadly, we're so socialized to focus on the external, right? How other people respond to our behaviors, good
Hmm.
or bad. And that becomes our wiring, like in our brain and in our system. And so we grow up and we have, like your coach said, we have these
Hmm.
subconscious belief systems about ourselves, and that's like driving. We
Hmm.
think we're driving, but it's like the subconscious is actually the one in the driver's seat. So that's how we respond to situations, it's how we show up. And so something in that child, back in, you know, we call it our inner child,
Hmm.
is attached in some way to being sick or having dis-ease in your body and
Hmm.
whatever response it was getting. But you know that that's not what you want, but
Hmm.
your subconscious is like, ha ha ha, you're not
Right.
done yet.
Yeah.
Like you have to pick, you got to address these other things. And
Yeah.
it takes years to unravel and figure out what those things are, right?
Yeah.
Like who knows what is triggering that for you,
Yeah. I
what
mean, it's so
experience.
crazy.
It's
Right.
so crazy, but it's also fascinating. I
And
love it.
unconsciously where I'm like, when we say like
Yeah.
we don't want this, But until we can say that consciously, but until you work through that and you tell your get your
Yeah,
subconscious to believe that. So it's been a really fascinating
I believe
journey.
it.
And I really do. I mean, I do a lot of mindset work. One of my main talks is on mindset and resilience. And so I really do believe that we get these things in life. And, there's so many different sayings out. Like, I don't think everything happens for a reason. I think that one can be really
Yeah,
dismissive to people.
I do
Um,
too. I do too.
sometimes I was saying like I really believe things happen for me versus to me. That I believe, but I was just in Dallas. It was my first speaking event back after surgery. So I was going to speak to this group and I still had bandages on my face. It was a hospital though. So I was like, what better
Yeah,
audience than healthcare. And I had this thought as I was making the drive back to the airport, and it's like maybe not even that it's happening for me. Maybe it's just happening. Like when we can release some attachment
yes, for
to
sure.
things being good or bad, and it's just is what it is. And I felt
It
this like sense
is.
of peace where it was just like it's just happening. It just happened to
It
me, and I
it
don't have to
is.
form a opinion on it. I just have to navigate through it.
Yeah, that's so true. That's this whole concept that I know we both know. It's just hard to sometimes implement of being present in the here and now. Because we can't control what happened before. We can't control what's going to happen. We can really only decide how we respond to this actual
Mhm.
second and moment in our life. And that takes a lot of work and practice, like anything that's
Mhm.
worthwhile, to get yourself in that zone. And I agree with you. So much of it is about our attachment to things, to outcomes, to perceptions, to people's responses, right?
Mhm.
And this is it's a journey. It takes,
Mhm.
some days we hold the capacity to be present more than others.
Yeah.
But it's a long process and but yet so important. And I think, like you're saying, it's just what is. It's what's here. It's what's present. And how are you going to respond to it?
Mhm.
What's in your best interest? What's in your highest and best good
Mhm.
that whatever that going on is around you. And it is fascinating. And I think the more we can pause and go inward and sort of reflect on that, like you said you did on your way back from the airport, like,
Mhm.
what if? What if this just is? And it's not about me. It's just my experience. And what can I gain from it? What can I learn from it? And you did in that moment, right? In that
Mhm.
moment, you were able to be like, wow, maybe I can release that sort of sense of responsibility around what is, because we do
Mm.
that too. Like,
Mhm.
subconsciously, what did I do to deserve this? Right? Like,
Right.
why is this
Yes.
happening to me? Well, we all do this because
Yeah.
we've learned that these things are tied together. Our
Yeah.
behaviors with what it is we experience. But I think sometimes it's just is what is.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fascinating. Wow. Well, first of all, I'm so grateful to you because I know you're just recently coming out of this most recent experience. And I'm so proud of you for how you've handled it. I've been watching and being
Yeah.
your cheerleader from social media. But I know we talk a lot about storytelling
Mhm.
because of the work that we both do. What inspired you to say yes to me when I said, "Are you willing to come on and talk about this publicly?" Like, what was that like? What was your first initial thoughts?
Yeah, it's so interesting because old version of Julie was very private in terms of like
Yeah,
I used to work in corporate before I started my own business. So I've been in business for a little over 5 years. And I believed that, I had to have this sort of tough exterior and not let on that anything was going on. Like I just remember multiple instances when I worked in corporate when I had personal, even like when I had to take time off work for literally the doctor, I could not go to work and I tried And I just felt like I can't let people know. It looks like weak to be like, oh, she's bedbound right now. Or
Yeah.
we had some scares when I was pregnant, and I remember I didn't want to let people know. Like I just felt like it was weak to show people that. And so that has been a journey of work. And I would say the more I've used, social media and kind of built my personal brand, and then as a speaker, that all got like I started flexing that muscle more. And I found that the more I shared those moments, uh, and still I'll say, especially this most recent one where I'm having facial surgery as a speaker, like I had these moments where like, oh,
Yeah.
does this disqualify me from things? Like, will people think, oh, we don't want to work with her firm or we don't want to hire her because she's got this thing happening? And I had to keep reminding myself is like, this is what qualifies me. I've heard people say the thing that
Yes.
you think disqualifies you is exactly what qualifies you. And that, I've heard people say
Yeah.
that your mess is your message, like all those things. And I had to remind myself of that. And I found that the more that I shared, and I think we have to be mindful of to what extent we share. Like I tell this to my speakers too when they're getting ready on stage to share a story, that it needs to be more of a scar versus like that open wound. And I've heard other people say that too, but
Yes.
you have to be enough through the other side.
Absolutely.
And so for me, I started sharing more about it, and I just would get messages from people saying like, "Thank you for talking about this," or "Wow," like even with I'm gonna go get my skin checked, or I'll say I forgot to add this in before. My husband had cancer 2 years ago, so
Right?
when we
Like,
started talking about that, he had testicular cancer, and I thought the if anything can come from this, it's us sharing and inspiring somebody to go get it checked out and catch it early,
mm,
like both of us did. So.
yeah.
I've found that when I share, not only can it feel cathartic for me, but also it gives people space to share if they feel that, and it can help them. And I'll just get message from people saying, "Hey, like thank you so much for sharing this because it did X, Y, and Z for me." And so
Yeah.
that's what's kind of led me to doing it.
I thank you. And I think there's so much packed in that I want to sort of piggyback on because I talk, this is my whole talk is about this, as you
Mm-hmm.
know, because you've helped me with it.
Yeah.
um but we have all this shame, right? And we don't even know we have shame, but we carry shame around what we perceive as our own weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
And so we're kind of taught again to stuff it all down and be fine. We're fine, we got this, everything's good, especially in a corporate environment,
Yeah.
because we're all like walking around wearing these masks because that's what we
Yes.
think we need to do. But it's so interesting when we can be vulnerable. It's like it takes a lot of courage to do what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing, to talk about this. But when you do that here and on in your, on stage,
Mm-hmm.
you are not only processing the healing for yourself, but you are, as you mentioned, connecting and resonating with other people. Maybe not the exact story, but
Mm-hmm.
everyone who's listening is going to have a sense of empathy, right? They're going to feel compassion for you. And they're also probably going to feel a sense of conscious connection to you
Mm-hmm.
because you are being real. And they're like, wow, I can do that too. Maybe I can, you know, open up a little bit more with
Yeah.
with the people that I'm close to. It doesn't have to be on a stage, a public stage. Maybe it could be, maybe it allows somebody to just reflect on something that they've experienced, that they've been maybe stuffing down or holding down. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
even imagine the impact that you'll have on people's lives when you start doing what you're doing, because
Mm-hmm.
people are going to be, they're going to feel less alone and less isolated. They're going to be like, wow, maybe I'm not broken,
Yep.
maybe I too can move through tough stuff like
Yeah.
Julie did or like Jen did. And I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
why I wrote my book, because I realized all these things that people didn't even know about me,
Yep.
that by sharing them, not only was I kind of liberating myself from all that shame, but I was like helping other women to be like, wow, I thought I was the
Mm-hmm.
only one that ever went through something like that, which of course is not true.
Yeah.
So I think it's this idea of sharing more of ourselves, deeper parts of ourselves, so that we can foster this sense of compassion and community. And look what happens. Whether you're on a corporate stage or in a community setting, like
Mm-hmm.
it has profound impact.
It does. I mean, And what I always say, and I probably said this to you when we worked together, but when I tell people and they're figuring out what to share too, I'm like, you are the only one that can
Yeah.
share your message in the way that only you can do it. Because sometimes people will say, is my story big enough? I haven't had Julie, I haven't had some of these big things happen to me.
Mm.
How can I get on stage, or how can I, whether your stage maybe is just a podcast or social media or just telling your friends, like maybe just you just opening up and using your voice more. Why would
Yeah.
I do that, or how could I do that? I don't have these big things. And it's like, because you're going to relate and connect to the people who also don't feel like they had maybe these big things happen, but they also have something they want to say or share. And
Yeah.
so that's something too that I remind myself, right? Because we usually are really good at helping other people, but ourselves, like, so I have to remind myself of like, even if I'm like, wow, because I'll be honest, like I feel so incredibly grateful and blessed. And when we went through my husband's cancer journey, we anchored into gratitude and perspective, and we
Yeah.
got the call that he was cancer free, and his journey with cancer was relatively quick. And I remember feeling like, do we even talk about this? Because in comparison to what other people have been through, his was
Right.
short. And for mine, even, it's like, okay, melanoma, mine was pretty invasive in terms of having to have, as a woman, as a speaker, having to have my face, cut up my forehead, all these things, but it didn't spread. I'm so grateful, and I
Right.
don't have to have follow-up things. So I'm like, is that big enough? And the thing is it's like that's all a matter of perspective,
It
and
is.
we don't need to compare it to somebody else, because by you sharing whatever your version of your thing is, it's going to give people space to connect with you and to share
It's so
what
true.
they want to share.
And everyone has a story. I mean, we have many stories, many, many,
Hmm.
many stories, right? Depending on how many years we've been here. Like and sometimes even the smallest of things, you may not really consider or think about how they impacted you, how you showed up in your life because of that experience, right? So
Hmm.
it's kind of a really cool opportunity to reflect on, the things and be like, wow, that by sharing that story, I could help another human being,
Hmm.
feel more connected. Like that's big. That's
Hmm.
really important. So share a little bit with your with the listeners here about this how doing this act of doing this today and the podcast and through all the work that you do, how does it sort of contribute to your own sense of self-empowerment? When you share your stories like this, do you
Hmm.
reclaim your kind of power over your narrative, those limiting beliefs we talked about that started when we were 0 to 7 years old?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Mhm.
it's, again, it's almost like self-therapy when you talk through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, you get to write. You don't necessarily get to write the narrative of what happened to you, because that happened or it's
Right.
happening. But you get to write how you think about it and how you perceive it and what it means for you, right? And so for me, and again, I'll just say this, like I'm very transparent to say like this, I'll come on here and say this stuff, but on my social media too, if you follow me on social media, like I'll say some days just really are hard. And like even though I do
Yeah.
mindset stuff and I believe that this is happening, I can make some reason out of it. It's like I have days where I'm just like, what in the world? And so,
Exactly. Exactly.
but I still think by you can have those moments, but I still really do believe down to my core. I have this gut feeling and this self-trust that I can figure the things out,
Mhm.
and so by talking about it and by sharing it, right, it's just like I get to decide how I want the story to go. And it's the same
Yeah.
thing like when you get on stage, you can decide how you want to tell a story, and you can make it a funny story, the same exact story. You could tell it multiple different ways because there's different
So
perspectives.
true.
And it's almost like how I see it is like I could look at what's happening to our family from all these different perspectives, and I get to choose which one and which is the one that's going to help us get through it versus just kind of be the victim to it.
Oh, it's so true. You get to basically rewrite your narrative. You get to
Mhm.
recreate your story from here forward. Yeah, it's very empowering, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and that's really why after writing my book and then doing that collective
Yeah.
anthology for women, because I saw it unfolding for all these people who had kept, women who knew each other yet didn't. right?
Yeah.
Like spend all this time together, and then they're reading and hearing the stories of what each person had gone through, and it just created a whole nother layer of understanding of one another. And that, so it's like this very multifaceted exercise, because
Mm-hmm.
you are, like you said, you're kind of going deep, and you're able to decide for yourself that you're in charge, because it's
Mm-hmm.
an inside job. You and I talk about
Yep.
that all the time.
Yep.
But then when you see the ripple effect, that's what I want to say, out into the community around you, when people get involved in this idea of sharing their narratives, and
Mm-hmm.
deciding what their narratives are, instead
Yeah.
of, like you said, being victim to the things that happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to take that information and those experiences and let it inform us going forward? And
Mm-hmm.
it's fascinating stuff. And storytelling's been around for a long time. This is not a new concept. I think we're just starting to see it differently, you know,
Yeah.
and the power that it holds, that it's not always for entertainment. It can
Mm-hmm.
really be for healing, deep
Yeah.
healing, for individuals, and connecting people in a way that I think we need now more than ever, right? I
Yeah.
think we need to feel a more conscious connection with each other, um, and less isolation, as we
Mm-hmm.
mentioned. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really great stuff. So that's why I'm so excited to be doing this work, to be, on the Soul Stories project, but also,
Mm-hmm.
looking to do it as a speaker, because I do think that I remember when I first was writing my talk, and wondering, would a corporate audience resonate with this? And if you think about it, they're still people. They're just
Mm-hmm.
people in a corporate work environment. They still have all the same challenges as human beings,
Yeah.
and everyone's sort of not, we don't get to escape any of that, normal life stuff that happens to us. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
great. And it is very empowering for sure. So thank you for being willing to go deep enough and share some of that with us. Have you felt like, doing when you do this work, that it's really sort of changed the connection that you have with people around you, whether it's your friends,
Yeah.
your family, or even your colleagues?
Yeah, I would say, so one thing I was just thinking about when you were talking before, so I have a podcast called It Starts With You, right? And so it's so
Yes,
funny when you said like we believe it's like the inside, because it's an inside job.
as is,
Confidence, healing, all
yeah,
of this, it has to start with you. You have to be the one to go first. And you and I are both in spaces and spaces and places essentially where we want to help other people. Like,
yeah,
I'm driven by this profound like pull to help people realize what they're capable of. And I do that
yeah,
through, coaching and speaking and all these different things. And if I want to be able to help other people to do that, like I have to lead the way to be because we're leaders in our spaces.
yeah,
And so, yes, to that question you just asked, is I do feel like it's helped create more, even, I think people I used to work with when I worked with them that have reached out, through everything we've been through and are like, thank you for sharing this. And it's almost like recreated connections with people. And
yeah.
one of the things I've said to my husband through all of this is sometimes we don't even really know what we need until something happens and then it brings out that need that we didn't realize. But I am one of those people who I'm not like an introverted extrovert. Like I'm a speaker and I go talk to all that, but like I'm not the social butterfly who then after speaking wants to stay for cocktails and dinner and hang out with everyone. Like I need some time alone. So
Yeah, yeah,
I like to have like, certain intimate friendships and I'm not the one that wants like a million friends, but
yeah.
when I have those connections, I really want them. And so when we get busy with life, sometimes we don't get to see people as often as we want. And what I
So
have
true.
found through everything that has happened is my close friends have just, I mean, our family and friends and community have just surrounded us because we had a lot
Mm,
of big things happen at once.
yeah.
And it had just pulled out, like friends that I had been meaning to get, we've been trying to get together for like a year. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, Julie, let's get together before your first surgery. And it was like
Yeah.
that time with them, we had coffee and, some gluten-free pastries and like we just hung out. And then some of my other friends, like it just brought us together again. And I was like, if anything, that this has showed us how much love we're surrounded by and has
Oh,
reconnected us to the people that really matter. And so
So
Yeah, I think
true.
by sharing that, it's like, wow, it's um and it's just again to me it's like it's just we're human.
Yeah,
This is all part of the human experience, and if I
it
were
is.
to not share, I mean, it would have been so strange for me. I'm on social media a lot for me to just not show up for a month and a half and all of a sudden show
Right.
back up and act like everything was the same. Like I just had to be let people know to the extent I
Yeah,
felt comfortable what was going on.
right. It almost gives people permission to hold space
Hmm.
that they want to be holding,
Yeah.
if that makes sense, right? Like, oh my
People sending
gosh,
us thoughts and loves and prayers, and it's like, I mean,
yes,
I felt it. You feel it.
of
And it's
course,
like, wow, we
yeah,
needed that. I needed that for healing.
yes. I was just going to say that your body felt it too, and so
Yeah.
that is, yeah, it's not just words; it's the energy. It's the energy
The
around
energy. Yeah.
the act of forming communities
Hmm.
and benefiting from being a part of them. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
really good for our soul on
Yeah.
all levels. Yeah. So, what would you say to somebody who might be listening to this show who's like, wow, I'm ready to tell my story? I mean, but maybe they have reservations, right? We all
Yeah.
do. We have fear. Oh my gosh, what will people think? Maybe I won't belong. Maybe I'll be misjudged. But what would you say to somebody who's kind of on the fence of maybe I'm ready to share some of my deeper sides of my life?
I mean, I would say just start small. Like, I think sometimes we
Yeah,
feel like it has to be all or nothing. Like, we say nothing or we like word vomit everything. And it's
exactly.
like, what if you just like took the next step? Like, maybe what would that next step for you look like?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like telling a close friend or family member,
Yeah. Or journaling, like writing it out for
journaling.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
what's just like, and then you start to build up this muscle of vulnerability and it gets easier. It's the same thing with like showing up on social media. Like if you want to start,
Yeah.
share going on stories or whatever it is, it's like you just gotta start and you just gotta like start doing little pieces. So I would say it's figure out maybe journaling, reflecting, like what are you comfortable sharing right now? Like what do you feel like you're enough, that you feel comfortable enough to share? And then just what's the first step that would feel the most aligned for you to share it?
Yeah.
And
And
then if that
safe.
feels good, you just keep, yeah, and safe.
Yeah.
And then you just build on that. Like it doesn't have to be
Exactly.
I either don't share it or I share it all. It can be, there's a lot
Right.
of and in between.
Absolutely. Start with a friend, start with a colleague, start with a therapist or a coach.
Yep.
Yeah. And it doesn't, again, you don't have to be looking for this huge impact. It's the first step to your point is to share it for your own healing and release and liberation.
Hmm.
And then just think of else you might be able to impact, even if it's one, two, three people around you who feel less alone because you've been real and vulnerable with them.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I love it. It's so great. We could talk forever,
I
you and
know.
me. I know. So, well, let's see. So, I think that we can, oh gosh, we do have to wrap it up here. I always lose track of time when we're chatting, but is there any other message that you would like to share regarding the work that you do? Because it's so important what you're doing to help people like me, and other people who have stories that they want to be sharing on a stage or on a podcast. What other support or advice would you like to offer to our listeners around the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, again, so one of the questions I ask all of my clients when they're trying to get to like the root of their message is like if you could shake people and tell them one thing, like what's the thing you want to tell them? And so like I
Yeah,
would challenge all of you listening to think about that. Like if you're feeling this pull that you want to do, whether you're if you are a small business owner, entrepreneur, and you're like, I want to be a speaker, or you want to use speaking to bring people into like we talk about, like bring people into
yeah,
your offerings, bring them into your world,
yeah,
start to get clear on that message. It's like, what's the thing based on your story, your skills and experiences and the people that you want to help? What's that thing that you would shake people and help them to do? And just having this belief in yourself that your message and your story matters and that it's going to help
yeah,
people. And obviously, if you're someone who's like, oh gosh, I have wanted to be, most of the times people find me, they're like, I've been thinking about this for a long time.
yeah,
Reach out, follow
yeah,
me on social media. I'm on Instagram and I share a lot of content on there. If you're a LinkedIn person, I'm over on LinkedIn, and feel free to, just send me a message and we can chat. But yeah, I believe, and I'm biased in this, I believe speaking is one of the best ways to grow your thought leadership, whatever that looks like
yes,
for you. And it does create this connection with people that it builds know, like, and trust really quickly.
It's so true. It's so true. And that trust that starts again with that self-trust, right?
Hmm.
Because if you don't trust yourself, it's going to be very difficult to expand that beyond.
Yes.
So it all goes back to your podcast name. It all
Yeah.
starts with you and the work that we both do as coaches and
Mm.
speakers and supporters. So I am just very, very grateful to you. I'm first of all, I'm very happy that everything went the way we had hoped it would for you and your
Yeah,
health
thank
journey.
you.
I'm proud of you for persevering and being so courageous and brave, and also for sharing your story with our listeners today and in the work that you do. Because again, we all know the impact that will have on
Hmm.
other people. So thank you. So everybody, please, I encourage you to follow Julie Menden, Menden, and just the beautiful work that she's doing. And if definitely, if you're a speaker or you're wanting to be a speaker, reach out to her. I've had such a great experience working with her, and I know our journey is not done yet. So thank you again, Julie, for
Thank you
being
so
on the
much.
on the show today. And
Thank you.
I know, I got to come back to Wisconsin and see you,
Yeah, I know, right?
meet you in person. We'd have a good time.
Maybe not now. It's 6 degrees right now, but
I know. Well, we had snow here
that's
in
true.
Boston this
That's
morning,
true.
which made me laugh because here I moved out of the Midwest so I could be near the ocean and have less cold winters. But here we are.
Here you are.
All right, my dear. Well, thank you so much. It's been my true honor to have you here today. I look forward to chatting with you again soon about all the wonderful things that you're doing. And thank you for being on the show. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. Have a beautiful day.